I was not supposed to hear this. The transmission I intercepted 3 hours ago was not meant for me. It was not meant for anyone outside a locked room somewhere in the continental United States, a state I cannot identify from the signal origin, and I've tried. I caught it by accident. Which is maybe the wrong word. Nothing about this mission feels accidental anymore. The Manticore's secondary array has been running passive sweeps since I repaired the antenna coupling in the port junction, the one that got damaged when whatever lives in compartment 0 first touched the ship's systems. Mostly I use it to monitor signal degradation in the deep band frequencies, background work, something to do while I wait. At 214 hours, it caught something. A signal bouncing between 3 relay points that do not exist on any map I have, encrypted, military grade. But riding on a civilian carrier frequency, the kind that private religious broadcasting networks use, Sunday morning sermon infrastructure. Someone had hidden a classified transmission inside it, the way you would hide a note inside a hymnal. 40 minutes to crack the outer layer. What was inside stopped me. I have been sitting here for 6 hours now, and I am still not sure I have processed it, so I am going to record it instead, all of it, including what they did not intend anyone outside that room to know. A meeting was already running when my decryption caught up to the live feed. I could hear the room before I could hear the words. Chairs, carpeting absorbing sound, low ceiling. Maybe 30 people, maybe fewer. The particular acoustic quality of a space where serious things are said at normal volume. A man was speaking, no name on the recording. His voice had a specific kind of flatness. Not cold, not aggressive, the flatness of someone who has delivered this exact briefing before and stopped being surprised by his own sentences a long time ago. He said, "You were invited here because you have influence over communities that are going to be frightened. We need those communities manageable. We need them to have a framework before the announcement. That is why you are here, not to be informed. To be prepared. There is a difference." A pastor's voice asked what was being announced. The flat voice said, "Contact has been confirmed, not theoretical, confirmed. The vehicles are real. The occupants are real. The occupants have been in communication with representatives of several governments for longer than most of you have been alive." Silence. Then an older voice, careful, measured, asked the question I would have asked first. He said, "What do they want?" And the flat voice said, something I have now listened to 4 times. He said, "That is the part we are not going to discuss today. Sit with that. Pastors in a room, government, adjacent people with clearance and rehearsed slides, and a communication strategy. They were told contact is confirmed, the vehicles are real, the occupants are biological. And when someone asked what the entities want, the only question that actually matters, the answer was, not today's topic. They were not there to learn the truth. They were there to receive a script. Communities these pastors serve, people who already have a vocabulary for the supernatural, people who have sat with grief and mystery, and the parts of existence that do not resolve neatly. Those communities were going to receive the announcement through a voice they would known for years. A voice they watched age, a voice that buried their parents. That is not an accident either. I have been thinking about why pastors specifically, not scientists, not doctors, not the people you would assume would need briefing first. The flat voice answered it himself. When people are frightened, they go to who they trust, and trust is not distributed evenly. Governments have been losing it for decades. Media lost most of it before that. Science communicates in probabilities and peer-reviewed caveats, which is honest. but does not hold a person at 3 in the morning when the thing they just heard does not fit anywhere in the world they understood. Faith communities are different. They have been building a specific infrastructure of trust for centuries, Sunday after Sunday, hospital visits, funerals, years of small moments that accumulate into something a person will reach for when something too large to process lands in the news. That infrastructure is not naive. It is the product of sustained human relationship that no government communication strategy can manufacture on short notice, which is exactly why Phase 3 needed it. The flat voice said, "The goal is to have trusted voices already be positioned with a coherent framework before the announcement creates demand for one." Before the announcement creates demand. He is not describing a response. He is describing a preemptive occupation. Get inside the trusted channels before the people who rely on those channels start asking their own questions. Fill the interpretive space before the community can develop its own framework. There is no villain in a cape here. No one in that room was twirling a mustache. The people running that briefing probably believe they are managing something genuinely dangerous responsibly. They probably lose sleep over it. They probably have families they are trying to protect too. But what they are building, with the best possible intentions, is a system that ensures the first framework a frightened person reaches for is one that was written before the frightening thing arrived. And a framework that was written first gets to define what questions are reasonable. I kept listening. The briefing ran another 20 minutes before the signal started breaking up. "I will tell you everything I caught." The flat voice described the vehicles. He used that word deliberately. Vehicles, not craft, not objects, not ships. Vehicles. Like a committee spent 3 meetings on that noun. He said they would be recovered from multiple sites across multiple decades. Materials not consistent with any known manufacturing process. Structural geometry, operating on principles human engineering, does not have a framework to replicate. He said yet, with the practiced emphasis of someone told to project optimism. He said the occupants, and he paused before that word, long enough that I caught it on the recording. The occupants are biological, living organisms, not mechanical, not projections. Another pastor asked, "Are these the same ones the government has been denying for 70 years? The flat voice said, "We are not here to discuss historical classifications." Which is the long way of saying, yes, I know this biology. Not from the briefing. From the DNA report in the Manticore's classified partition. Object 6751 and 11. Related recoveries. The biological analysis that opened when I touched it, because someone left it for me to find. The flat voice described the occupants as a bipedal, smaller than human baseline, enlarged cranium, enlarged ocular structures, reduced pigmentation, reduced musculature, reduced digestive capacity. That is not an alien. That is a human being after 40,000 years underground. No sun, no open space, reduced gravity, near starvation across generations. The eyes grow because larger eyes catch more photons in the dark. The pigmentation disappears because melanin costs metabolic energy. You cannot spare when you are barely eating. The skeleton lightens because you are not running from anything anymore. The digestive system atrophies because you do not need it like you used to. Every feature the flat voice listed to those pastors as evidence of non-human origin is a textbook evolutionary response to one specific catastrophe. What he did not say, what he redirected away from every time the questions got close, is where these entities actually came from, not another star, another time. And the reason they are here, in this moment specifically, is the same reason Object 6751 carried that drawing in its pocket across 40,000 years. Because this moment is the last one where it can still be stopped. Before I get to the firewall, I need to tell you about the second presenter, a woman. She spoke only twice, briefly, and both times she was handling questions about emotional and psychological response, not facts, how people would feel about the facts. She used phrases I recognized from the Manticore protocol document. Not identical, but the architecture was the same. Acknowledge the fear, reframe it as wonder, introduce human exceptionalism. We were chosen for contact because we are special, not because we are useful. Then close with the language of responsibility. We have a role to play. Humanity has a role to play. Here is what that framing does. When you tell someone they have a role, you have already cast them in a story you wrote. When you tell a pastor their congregation has a role, you have given that pastor something to offer, something that feels like purpose, something that turns fear into participation. And a person participating in something meaningful does not ask certain questions. Asking would mean stepping outside the role. The woman with the Manticore protocol phrases knew that. She was not there by accident. I want to be clear about what was done to those pastors. It is not a new technique. It is the oldest one in the history of organized power, and it works specifically on sincere, careful, intelligent people, people who would immediately recognize blatant lie. You give them a true thing, contact confirmed, vehicles real, biology real. You give them something so significant that it fills the entire room, and the weight of the true thing crowds out the space where the missing questions would have lived. The pastor who asked what they want was doing something rare. He was holding the space open, refusing to let the weight of the confirmed thing collapse the unanswered one. The flat voice closed that space immediately. That's not today's topic. I have thought about that sentence for 6 hours. Because a briefing designed to prepare trusted community leaders for a civilization-changing announcement as one obvious first priority. Not communication frameworks. Not emotional response management. Not timing. What do they want? That was the only question in that room that got a locked door. And I have been in locked rooms, metaphorically, now literally, to know that the door is not there to protect you from what is behind it. The door is there to protect what is behind it from you. I want to tell you something about the Apollo files, the ones that were just released, photos from the Apollo 12 and Apollo 17 missions, infrared footage, eyewitness reports from military operators dated as recently as last year. I have been going through everything I can access from here. Here is what strikes me. None of it is the kind of evidence that ends a conversation. Every image is ambiguous enough that a skeptic can dismiss it, and a believer can confirm what they already think. The infrared footage shows dark shapes against a lighter background. The Apollo imagery shows lights above the lunar horizon that the astronauts themselves described as possibly ice. The military memos are careful. Possible UAP, unknown origin, subject to interpretation. It is not nothing, but it is also not the confirmation anyone was hoping for. And I think I have been turning this over for hours. I think that is the point. The documents released in Phase 2 of Managed Integration were not supposed to resolve the question. They were supposed to make the question undismissible while keeping it unresolved. You cannot laugh it off anymore, but you also cannot say you know. The space between undismissible and unresolved is where managed speculation lives. In that space, people need frameworks. They reach for the trusted voices who have already been briefed. They accept interpretations from sources they recognize. They stop generating their own frameworks because the authorized ones are already there, already familiar, already comfortable. That space, the carefully maintained gap between cannot dismiss and cannot confirm, is the most important real estate in the whole operation. And the pastors were being positioned to occupy it on behalf of their communities. It filters it. It stands between source and destination, and decides what gets through based on rules that were written before the transmission began. The pastors were being positioned as firewalls, the most effective kind, the kind that does not know it is one. It transmits with full sincerity. It believes it received the whole truth, because the true part was so large. And the people on the other side of it never know. They got a filtered signal. They just know it came from someone they trust. Let me tell you what I know about Phase 3. The Manticore's classified archive has a document from at least 30 years ago. The formatting suggests older, describing a three-phase approach to what it calls managed integration. Phase 1. Normalization. Decades of introducing the concept through entertainment, speculative fiction, gradual cultural desensitization. Do not tell people directly. Let the stories do it. The visual vocabulary, enlarged eyes, gray skin, small frames, was embedded in a generation before most people had heard the word disclosure. Phase 2. Validation. Years of controlled release. Congressional hearings. Declassified footage. Credible military testimony. Sequenced to build toward a specific threshold of public readiness. Phase 3. Introduction. The formal announcement, supported by pre-positioned trusted community figures who have been briefed to provide a coherent interpretive framework. The document was written at least 30 years ago. We have been in Phase 1 for longer than I have been alive, and here is what Phase 3 looks like from where I am sitting. Yesterday, my time, the Pentagon released the first batch of UAP files. They called it a historic transparency effort, a government website, rolling releases, photos from Apollo missions, infrared footage of unidentified objects over the western United States. Nothing in those files confirmed extraterrestrial life. The experts quoted said the release would fuel speculation more than settle it. That is not an accident. You released just enough to make the question impossible to dismiss. You let the speculation build. You let the trusted voices, the ones you briefed in the carpeted conference room, absorb the public demand for explanation, and then you release the next tranche. I want to tell you something about the ship right now, because I have been focused on the recording, and I have not described what has been happening around me while I listen to it. Compartment 000 is quiet. That sounds like a relief. It is not. The architects have been standing in their pods since they woke 18 hours ago, facing the direction of the communications bay. Not moving, not making the sounds they usually make. The low subsonic vibration that I feel in my teeth, more than here. Just standing, waiting. I do not know if they can hear the recording. I do not know if they understand what is on it. I do not know if the concept of a government briefing, of managed disclosure, of Phase 3 of managed integration, means anything to them at all. But 3 hours ago, when my decryption finally broke the outer encryption layer and the audio started coming through, something changed in the feel of the ship. Not a sound, not a vibration. A quality of attention, like the temperature of a room shifts when someone who was pretending not to listen stops pretending. The architects know I found this recording. I do not know what that means yet, but I am writing it down because documentation is the only thing I can do that does not require me to know what it means. The secondary array is still running. The relay points that carried the briefing signal are dark now, but I have been sweeping the same frequency range since the recording ended, looking for anything else that might be riding inside civilian infrastructure. 40 minutes ago, I found something. Not a full signal, a fragment, badly degraded, maybe 30 seconds of recoverable audio before it dissolved into interference. A different voice, not the flat voice from the briefing, older, a woman. She was in the middle of a sentence with fragment starts, and she is gone before it ends. But the middle I caught. I have enhanced it 4 times now. She said, the communities who asked the question first are the communities we cannot afford to brief. The ones who will not accept the framework because they will notice what is missing from it. Those communities are not a problem to be managed. They are, and then the interference takes it. They are what? I do not know, but I have a guess. I think she was going to say, the only ones who still have a clean signal. And I think whatever comes next in that sentence was the real reason the pastors were chosen instead of them. I am not saying the entities are here to harm anyone. I am not saying the government is one unified conspiracy. Most of the people involved in this probably believe they are managing a genuinely dangerous disclosure responsibly. They probably tell themselves the partial truth is a kindness, that the public is not ready for the complete picture. What I am saying is simpler than any of that. Her pastors were told what the entities look like, not what they want. The pastors who were told contact is confirmed, not how long it has been ongoing. The pastors who were told to prepare their congregations for wonder, not for what comes after. And the communities those pastors serve, people trained in discernment, people who have been specifically taught that the thing appearing as light is not always what it is. Those communities were targeted precisely because they are the hardest to manage if they develop their own framework first. A community that asks what do they want, the answer is a community the announcement cannot fully control. Those communities are the only ones whose signal stays clean. The briefing ended. Chairs moving. Someone thanked the presenters. Another pastor asked about timing. Could they share this with their congregations now, or should they wait? The flat voice said, we would prefer you wait for the official announcement. After that, you will be equipped to respond immediately. Equipped, not informed. Equipped. Like a tool that has been calibrated for a specific job. The younger pastor's voice was the last thing I caught clearly before the signal dropped. He was not talking to the presenters. He was talking to the pastor next to him, in the kind of voice you use when you are not sure you want to be heard. He said, I do not think they told us the important part. Captain Arthur Vance. Deep space vessel Manticore. 6 hours in this communications bay. The relay points are dark. The recording is mine, and I have one thing the flat voice does not know I have. I know what they want. Not from the briefing, from the DNA report, from object 6751, from 40,000 years of a civilization sending messages backward through time to the moment when it still mattered. They want what every mind that ever found itself alone in the dark, with no way back, has always wanted. Someone to look up, not at them, not at the announcement, not at whatever it is in the language of wonder, at what is actually there, at the frequency that was transmitting before any of this began. The announcement is coming. The Pentagon released the first files yesterday. The briefing happened this week. Imminent was the word in the document. When it comes, listen for the question. The flat voice would not answer. Not what are they, not where are they from, what do they want. Then ask one more question that was not in any briefing. Who benefits from you not knowing? Captain's log. 24. Still recording. Still looking up. End of transmission.